Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'm filming this a little intro before the intro clip because I started working on this vlog many years ago, and I'm not kidding you. I don't know what happened, but this just got very derailed and I just took forever to read these books. So just be prepared that in a second you will see way past Kitty with like bad camera, bad audio, all of that. I'm very sorry about it. I also have no idea when you will actually see this vlog because this is just gonna be one that I keep for a rainy day, you know? So at some point you will be able to watch this, but you have been warned that some of these clips are very old. And I hope this can be a fun kind of time capsule thing as well. It will be so cringe to edit, not gonna lie, but I think I'm gonna give it over to Past Kitty, and I hope you have fun watching this vlog that has been in the making for years. Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to start a new reading vlog because I don't have enough of those going on already. And this reading vlog will be all about feminist literature. So I want to read 3 feminist books, and I think I have chosen the 3. This might change because I don't know how fast I will get to these, and maybe something else will slither its way in there. But for now, the 3 books I have chosen. The first one is The Woman's History of the Modern World. So this is a non-fiction book that kind of breaks down history through a feminist lens. Then we have this German book called Radikale Zärtlichkeit by Şeyda. This is, I think, a book about love through a feminist lens. And last but not least, we have this book called Die letzten Tage des Patriarchats by Margarete Stokowski, and this is an essay collection that talks about different themes of feminism, like different things that you can view through the feminist lens. So this is actually the one I'm gonna start with because I'm currently halfway through this book and I wanted to give you my first update. Now, in this book, we have a collection of articles and little essays. It's very short form, and so these things were published before in magazines in Germany. There's the Taz, which is a very left-leaning journal, and then we have, I think, Spiegel Online, which is more mainstream, I would say. The author is writing for these journals, and then this is kind of like a best of, collecting articles from 2011 to 2018. So this feels kind of like a time capsule because, yeah, we're viewing kind of things that have happened during those years, and sometimes there are little notes to the articles, like responses that the author received, or just when there was like another article that referenced this one and stuff like that. So those are quite interesting. With the articles themselves, the like quality is not very consistent, I would say, just because we're covering quite a few years of this person's work. So the earlier ones are usually not very interesting to me, while the later ones are more recent, obviously. So the things that they reference are also more relevant, I feel like. And then just the craft level is better, I would say. So this is kind of a mixed bag, and actually from the title I thought this was something completely different, so I'm also caught a little bit off guard because I just expected that this was very different from what it actually is. I got this as a gift, so I never really looked into it. So far we have had 5 chapters, and I just want to quickly mention what they talk about. So the first chapter was about sex and love, so this one probably wasn't like the most interesting to me, just because sex is not something that plays a very big role in my life. I do identify as on the asexual spectrum, so yeah, that just is something that I don't really think about a lot. There was also one article in there where she talked about a certain German accent and how it is not very sexy, and that she actually said that to a friend of hers who had that accent, and that one I hate it. Like, sorry, but if someone would come up to me and be like, your accent is so unsexy, I would be pissed. So yeah, I really did not like that one. The second chapter is about feminism, and this one I did really enjoy because it shows like the facets and discusses the concept and like questions of who can self-identify as a feminist, what does that even mean, and stuff like that. So I did enjoy that one. The third chapter is called something like, I don't know how to translate it, like stupid things or something like that. So this talks about just things that if you are very left-leaning, you would like to change, and just debates that you don't want to have and stuff like that. So it talks, for example, about refugees, but also a lot of other things. There was an article about the hunt for the identity of Elena Ferrante in there, for example. There was a debate about a Spanish poem that was written on the wall in a German university, and that could be viewed as being quite sexist because it basically says or implies that women are objects to be looked at. And so yeah, there was a debate about that and stuff like that. So very miscellaneous, I would say. Then we have the fourth chapter, which is about men. And there were some things in there that I actually did enjoy. There was an article about men spreading, for example, which I thought was kind of funny because I think this debate has died down a lot again, but maybe I'm just not informed very well. I don't know. And the first chapter was about the body. And now this one is always a theme that is equally very interesting and very boring for me because this is my field of research. So on the one hand, I never learn anything new in these chapters. And on the other hand, I still think it is interesting to see how it is debated in like mainstream media and outside of like the scientific area. So this obviously talked a lot about body positivity and how there are still a lot of people who don't see any value in that. And we do have a German TV show, like a reality TV show, where people can try to become models. And so there was an article about that and how that influences young girls and how it increases the likelihood of eating disorders and stuff like that. None of them were really like new and exciting to me, just because this is also the kind of stuff that I read in like magazines and journals when they come out. So it does feel a little bit pointless. Like I can get through these super quickly, but I don't feel like I'm gaining a lot from them. So yeah, as I said, I was just expecting something very different. So I guess I'm just a little bit underwhelmed by what this actually is, but I hope I can read the rest of this today and give you an update later how I like the second half. So last night I was editing another vlog and I realized that I had never filmed a final update for this book, and it has been a couple of weeks now, so I will try to give you my final thoughts on this, hopefully, and I hope it still makes sense. I'm very sorry for this, but I read this during a weekend when I wasn't really feeling well, and I guess I just convinced myself that I had filmed an update for this. But I did not. So I finished Die letzten Tage des Patriarchats, and this is an essay collection, as I probably said before. And overall, I decided to give this 3 stars. I think that it was interesting in a way, especially if you like the author and you can kind of see her kind of progress throughout the years, the different topics she picked up to write about, but it also feels very mixed, I would say. So there are some very interesting essays in here, and there are some that just haven't aged well, or I think the topics aren't that relevant anymore, and stuff like that. So it was also interesting to get kind of a reminder of what the world was like before the pandemic, I guess. But I don't think that I really gained anything from this collection. I don't think that it was what I expected it to be. Now, I know that the author has a second book that actually came out before this one, I think, that is probably more of what I thought this would be. So maybe one day I will check that one out. But yeah, this one, it's fine, you know, if you know someone who is a fan of this author, I think it could be a nice gift. But I don't think that if you are a feminist and you are part of the ongoing discussions and stuff like that, I don't think you will gain anything new from this book. So 3 stars it is, and I'm intrigued to see how I like the other 2 books, and I will update you whenever I read those. So I'm now halfway through the next book for this little experiment. This one is Radikale Zärtlichkeit, and it focuses on love and romantic relationships and how they help the patriarchy stay in place, how it puts women in their place. And yeah, I'm halfway through now. I'm really vibing with this book. I really appreciate what the author is saying here. I think one thing that I would criticize is that there is one other author, like a researcher or whatever you would say, who is very prominent in this book, and I've had moments where I was like, maybe I should just read their works instead of this book, and that is Eva Illouz. She's a sociologist in Israel and worked a lot with the whole like topic of relationships and love and modern society. This book has a very strong link between the patriarchy and capitalism, which I think makes absolute sense. We have a little bit of a historical look at where all of our understandings of love and romantic relationships come from, especially looking at philosophy, because that is what the author studied. So that was quite interesting because it is an angle that I know nothing about. As a sociologist, I had one course in philosophy, and that was all about like research history and stuff like that. So I don't really know what philosophers said about like women and men and love and all of that. So that was very interesting. But just the like personal parts that are in here as well, I just really enjoy reading about that. I really enjoy the perspective of the author, and there were some parts that really resonated with me, and I'm really enjoying this book. So I have very high hopes for the second half, and then I'll let you know how I like this book overall. So last night I finished Radikale Zärtlichkeit by Şeyda, and this I really liked the beginning of this, as I said in my previous update, but I felt like it fizzled out a little bit. I much preferred the beginning, where we get a little bit more of a philosophical and a historical look at love and relationships and romantic relationships and stuff like that. I feel like, yeah, the like ending just wasn't that memorable to me. I don't think that there is a lot that I will keep thinking about personally, and also not a lot that I learned new from those later chapters. But I think if this whole concept of romance and love in a capitalist society is very new to you, then this is a great starting point. It will give you great recommendations for other books on this topic to check out, from Audre Lorde to Bell Hooks to Eva Illouz. So I think this is a great starting point if you're not very deep into the topic, and I just loved how the author blended all of these different texts with her own experiences, especially as a woman of color from an immigrant family, and how how her experience also kind of inspired her thoughts on this whole topic. I also really liked the mentions of Turkish pop culture that we get in here. So there are some movies mentioned and also a song that I then listened to, and that was very interesting because even though I have listened to a lot of Turkish pop music in my life, for some reason, don't ask, I still found it great to have these examples that also deal with like love and romance in this book as well, to also portray just different angles, and I just really enjoyed that. So overall, I gave this one 4 stars. I would recommend if you're interested in it, and I think even though I might not think about this like every day, it was still very inspiring. So I'm now halfway into the women's history. I have finished the first 2 parts of this book, and I wanted to give you a quick update. Now, this is quite the interesting reading experience for me. I really enjoy reading the book. I think the way it's written, it's very easy to read and to consume, and yeah, it's fun to read this book, which, with like a nonfiction, it can always like be a little bit dry or not. And I would say this one is definitely not dry at all. However, because of that, I don't feel like the information is always 100% accurate. I feel like sometimes, because this is told in kind of like anecdotes, it's just like a good storytelling thing, but not always like 100% the truth. I'm not saying that there's lies in this book, but just things that are not completely accurate. So if you're okay with that, if you just want, a little bit of a vibe about the history of women, then I think this book could be a really good fit. As I said, I'm really enjoying it. I also enjoyed that there were quite a few women mentioned in here that I hadn't heard of before, especially for the US, but also other parts of the world. The author acknowledges at the beginning of the book that this is very much focused on the Western world, and that she tried to include other countries as well, but because her area of expertise is the Western world, she tried to focus kind of on what her expertise is. And she also said that she hopes that this inspires other women to write books about these other parts of the world that she isn't so knowledgeable about. So in this one, we do look a lot at the US, at the UK, Europe in general. We do have some mentions of kind of other countries, Arab countries. I think there was like Hawaii mentioned, and Japan, some Asian countries. So it's not a lot, but there are sprinkles at least of those other countries as well, and other areas of the world, and the women who did amazing things there. Now, to give you a little bit of a time frame of what we're covering in the first half of the book, we're starting out around the time of the French Revolution and the American War of Independence, and then we are moving within the first half up to the World Wars. So we are going through history quite fast. It's not always chronological because the chapters are more about topics. So sometimes there will be like quick mentions of something that will happen further in the future. Then we go back to the time we're looking at. We do cover like very different kind of topics. We do mostly talk about the rights of women and the fight for those rights. We see kind of like the French Revolution, how this was all about like kind of like everyone being equal, but then women weren't equal, and how the women were such an important part of the fight in the French Revolution, but then gained no rights at all in the process. And we're starting from that point onwards, and then see how women just never gave up fighting for their rights. And sometimes we really have to remember how new some of the rights are that we're enjoying. Like, for example, in Germany, the right of a woman to have a job without her husband kind of giving permission for it. That started in Western Germany in the 1970s, which is like not that far away. It's like 50 years. Hooray. And I think for a lot of like younger women and girls, that all seems like it has always been this way, but it's like very new stuff that women fought for. And I think this book does a really good job portraying that. We do also look at the right to vote, which was one of the like hardest fights, but then also something like the right to use contraception, for example, because if you can't plan your pregnancies and kind of your body, then you can't plan your life and stuff like that. So I think it's also very interesting to look at kind of like the shifts of like what was perceived as the important rights and fights during different times. And then with the world wars, that's where the second part ends. We see this like big kind of break. In a way, women, especially in the UK, said they would stop all the protesting and stuff for the war efforts. But also we see that because of the war, because of the men being off fighting somewhere, a lot of women had to do things that they had never done before, and also got to experience things that they never had experienced before, and how that also emboldened stuff. Also maybe made men see that they need women and that they need to give women their rights. So overall, really enjoying this so far. As I said, if you don't need this to be like 100% accurate information on every single page, and you like it to be more like anecdotes, just to broaden your horizon a little bit, then I would recommend this book. We have made it to the end of this video because I just finished reading The Women's History by Rosalind Miles, and I am giving this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed my reading experience with this book, and I think if you want a fun and light-hearted but also inspiring and sometimes very sad introduction into this topic, then I think this is a very good place to start. I do have some criticisms of the book, but I don't think that this should deter you from reading it if you're interested. I think my biggest criticism that I have is that for me personally, a book about women isn't complete if we don't talk about trans women and trans rights, and this book really doesn't do that. So I think that is a huge missed opportunity, and a lot of the progress we have seen in women's rights as well as LGBT rights has come from the activism of trans women, and I feel like I didn't get enough of that in this book. Apart from that, I think that this is a great overview. It doesn't go into a ton of like depth with these topics, but I feel like after reading this, I have a couple of things I now want to look into more. There were definitely things I hadn't heard about. One of the most shocking things to me was that the first female rabbi of the world was in Germany in the 1930s, and obviously she died in a concentration camp, and I had no idea. I have never heard about that before, and I think that is terrible. And it says a lot about the German education system. But yeah, this is just one of the many facts you can find in this book. The final parts are more of the like more recent history. Now, this book was written in 2020, so we do have a little bit of note at the end also about Trump becoming president instead of Hillary in 2016, and it talked about that a little bit, but obviously now 5 years later we see that the backlash to a lot of these rights that are talked about in this book here has been so much worse than what could have been anticipated at the point where this book was written. So this also talks about Roe v. Wade, but obviously in 2022 Roe v. Wade was actually overturned, which is not part of this book. It mentions that it is being challenged challenged, but at that point in time, I guess nobody, really wanted it to happen, and then it did. Well, not nobody, like there is some terrible people who wanted it to happen, but yeah, so there is also like a little bit of a gap. If you read it today, a lot of what seems more hopeful in this book, you're like, yeah, but that didn't turn out so great. We also have like something like the whole Epstein situation. Now this book talks about Me Too and Harvey Weinstein, but then obviously the crimes of Epstein, what he did to young girls, and the way that it is dealt with right now in the media, and especially with the US administration right now, is just horrible. And we can see so many times that we haven't made as much progress as we need to make, and we are actually kind of getting onto the wrong track right now. But on the other hand, I don't want to give up hope. Let's just say that. Yeah, I think we can't give up hope, and we just need to keep fighting. And I think that is a message that is in this book as well, that it has never been a straight journey, that there has always been pushback, there have always been losses. And I think one of the like central things we have to keep in mind when it comes to like the feminist movement and the women's movement is that this world that we're living in right now, with all of these rights, with women voting, with having the chance to live a life that is independent of a man, this has only been a reality for about 50 years in the Western world. So in Western Germany, for example, up until the middle of the 1970s, you had to have a permission of your husband to be able to work as a married woman and stuff like that. So this is like really, really important to keep in mind, that even though for like us, like younger generations, it feels like this has been something that is like a staple of our existence, is not. It's something that so many women fought for so long. And they, like the amount of women in this book who fought with all of their power and their might and their lives for something, and they never actually got to see it. Like the women who fought for the right to vote, most of them never actually got to vote. And so this is always a fight, not for us, but like for us living right now, but also for us in the future, like for our kids, for our aunts, and no, for our nieces and nephews, and for all the children that we can't even conceive of right now, that they will one day have even more chances to live the life that they want to live. And I think that's just so important to keep in mind. And again, something that is really like the message of this book. And on the one hand, like very sad, but on the other hand, it also shows that if enough people put their mind to it, one day it will happen. And right now, we see that with the backlash. Like, this is just very small, very conservative religious groups that are trying to push our world into a direction that the majority of people in the Western countries do not want to go in. Like, if you look at polls, if you ask people about different policies, most people usually agree with the more progressive stuff than they actually vote for. And I think that is just so important to keep in mind, that just because like there is like political parties and they get elected, it doesn't mean that the people voting for that actually want that kind of stuff, which I know sounds super weird, but if you look into the research, you can actually see that a lot of the times. And yeah, I don't know, maybe one day we will find a better way to live and to deal with the world. I really hope so. I really hope that we will not get into the Hunger Games, Handmaid's Tale kind of storyline, even though Trump just recently announced his own Hunger Games. Whatever. We have to believe that there's something better out there. So I don't know what that told you about the book. I think this is just kind of like the feeling that I got from reading this book. And I think that is an important feeling. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I also teared up quite a bit reading this book. There are just so many tragic things that are mentioned in this book. For example, a woman who died in Ireland because her pregnancy went wrong and she couldn't get the abortion that she needed, even though it was clear that she was having a miscarriage. And so she passed away from that, and that started like a whole thing in Ireland where they turned over the law. And just thinking about like women having to die for stuff like that, it's just heartbreaking. And there's just so much more in this. Also, the amount of times that very inspiring women are mentioned and then they died so young, like in their 30s, because of like stuff connected to childbirth or because of breast cancer. It's just so sad to see. Yeah, just it's just it's hard to read. It always makes me very emotional. Like, these people, they put so much of themselves to like, improving the world, and then they were taken so early. Okay, I think that's enough of a rant about this book. As I said, if you want a good like introduction that is more like anecdotal and fun to read, but still gives you a ton of information about feminism and the women's movement in the last 200 years, then feel free to read this book. I don't see why you wouldn't. And with that, we have come to the end of this video. And as this video has been recorded over multiple years, this is going to be a bit of a rough end of the video, but let me give it a good old try. So usually when I do reading vlogs like that, I rank the books at the end of the vlog. So that's what we're gonna do now. And on my third place, we have Die letzten Tage des Patriarchats by Margarete Stokowski. And I think this one, the little bit of it that I remember is just that I didn't really love that it was just a collection of different writings from the author, just like thrown into a book, which just made it not very cohesive. And I think there were quite a few repetitions and stuff. And I always just feel a little bit cheated if all of the stuff has been published before and then they just throw it into a book and sell it to you again. I don't love that so much. I can't really remember anything of the actual like content of the book, to be fair. So yeah. And I think it was also more older stuff, right? It was also more like 2015 kind of writing. And then I read this book in like, 2022? I don't know. Then I think on second place, I would put the women's history. While I did really enjoy getting this glimpse, and I think that the writing style of this book is actually really good to get some information without having to use a ton of brain power to read it. I still felt like this was more kind of like surface level, more of an introduction, and maybe not quite the right thing for where I'm at right now. But it also gave me a lot of like interesting ideas where I could read more in the future. So solid book, and enjoyed it. And then my number one would be Radikale Zärtlichkeit by Şeyda. I think this one has by now been translated into English as well. Okay, now I have to take that back. It is the other book by the author that has been translated, and it's called Hate, The Uses of a Powerful Emotion, which is a book I definitely want to check out as well, because that's something I've been reading up about a little bit too. However, Radikale Zärtlichkeit, I really enjoyed it. I think it was a very like fresh take on the topic, and even though I don't remember a ton of it, it's a book I kept on my shelves, so it must have had something like good in it, and I definitely feel like I should give it a reread and just like remind myself again. It's going to be so interesting to edit this video as well, because yeah, I will just see like all the thoughts I had about these books that I can't remember now. So yeah, it's going to be fun. But with that, we have reached the end of this video. If you made it all the way through, let me know how was this like little time travel experience for you. Probably it's going to be very cringe for me, but I'm still glad that this video eventually got to see the light of day. I hope you had fun watching it. Leave a like, that always helps me out, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye!